Today, we're going to follow a single, powerful idea on an incredible 800-year journey. We'll see how a 13th century theory about how the universe was literally created got transformed into a modern tool for unlocking your own personal power. It's a fascinating story about how a cosmic code became a guide to our own potential. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with this idea of a cosmic dialogue, then meet the board of directors that kind of runs the universe. After that, we'll zoom way in on the core principle of life itself. Then you'll see how that ancient idea is being used today to change our very biology. And finally, we'll wrap up by unpacking a really important distinction that brings it all home. All right, let's start our journey way back in the 13th century with a philosopher who had this radical idea that the universe wasn't just commanded into existence. No, it was spoken into being through a kind of grand negotiation. The philosopher Ibn al-Arabi pictured creation as this really dynamic event. Instead of just a single top-down command like, let there be light, he imagined it more like a symbolic dialogue where the very principles of reality were sort of debating and deciding how the universe should even come to be. And he called these principles the divine names. In his philosophy, these names didn't just show up. They held what you could call a cosmic council. They were making requests of each other, establishing the entire framework for existence before anything was even created. So what are these divine names exactly? Well, you've got to think of them less like simple titles or labels and more like active creative forces. They're almost like cosmic job descriptions. Each name is responsible for a specific slice of reality. Like the creator is responsible for bringing things into being, or the knower is what gives them intelligence. Now, with all these different creative forces flying around, you may think it would be total chaos, right? But Ibn al-Arabi, he theorized a system, a kind of cosmic management team to make sure everything worked together in perfect harmony. He identified this core group he called the leaders of the names. And you can really think of them as the universe's executive team, which you see right here. These are the primary principles that oversee everything else. It makes sense, right? For anything to exist, it first needs life. For it to have a purpose, it needs knowledge and will. This team makes sure there's a logical order to all of creation. And this hierarchy is it's everything. It establishes a crystal clear order of operations for reality itself. The leaders make sure that all the other cosmic forces are working together, in concert, which prevents chaos and builds a universe that is structured and intelligent, not just random. And get this, governing that whole cosmic company, you have two master principles. First, you've got divinity, which is like the company's core mission statement. It's the principle of unity, making sure all these different forces ultimately trace back to a single unified source. And then you have lordship, which is like the chief operating officer. That's the principle of order, assigning roles and making sure the entire system runs like a well-oiled machine. Okay, so that was the 800-year-old cosmic blueprint. Now we're going to hit the fast-forward button and jump to today. We're going to see how one of these huge abstract principles has been totally reimagined as something intensely personal and incredibly practical. And this is really where modern spiritual teachers take this ancient framework and just flip it on its head. They start asking a really simple but profound question. If these divine names are the building blocks of the entire cosmos, then what if? What if they're also the building blocks of you? So let's zero in on the first, the most fundamental of all those leaders, Hayy, the ever-living. Now, in the classical view, it's the cosmic prerequisite for everything else. But in the modern view, it's seen as the literal source code of vitality and aliveness that exists inside every single one of us. And this is where the scale shifts dramatically, from the whole cosmos right down to our own cells. Modern interpretations, like the one quoted here, they propose that this principle of Hayy isn't some abstract force way out there. They suggest it's an intimate reality, something that is literally resonating inside every single one of our heartbeats. So if this life energy is already inside of us, how do we actually access it? Well, according to modern sources, it's not a passive state. It's something we can consciously engage with and, active. Proponents of this view describe a 4-step transformation cycle. It all begins with awareness, just becoming aware of this life principle within you. That awareness then leads to the practice of remembrance, or consciously focusing on it. They then claim that this focus can lead to a biological shift, something they call DNA activation, which ultimately creates a whole new personal reality for you. Now, this is where these modern interpretations make a really fascinating move. They start connecting this ancient spiritual idea to concepts from modern science. For instance, they'll point to the field of epigenetics, suggesting that your conscious focus can actually change how your genes are expressed. They also talk about biophotons, claiming that your state of mind can literally affect the light being emitted by your own DNA. And the claims get even more specific, extending all the way to our brain chemistry. This chart here kind of illustrates the effect they're proposing. The basic idea is that by consciously resonating with this principle of life, a person can actively lower their stress hormones, like cortisol, while at the same time boosting the neurotransmitters that make us feel good, like serotonin. But according to this modern interpretation, the effects don't just stop with your own body. This vitality is said to ripple outward, transforming your relationships at home, at work, and even in society as a whole. At home, the claim is that one person's renewed vitality can actually elevate the entire family's what they call an electromagnetic field. The result? More peaceful children and more balanced, harmonious relationships. And this same energy is said to extend into the workplace. It can boost your creativity, your intuition, and your productivity. And it can shift the whole dynamic of a team from one of competition to one of genuine harmony and collaboration. And then if you zoom out to the macro level, the theory suggests that as more and more individuals start to cultivate this living consciousness, it can actually elevate the entire collective. It encourages values like empathy and justice, and even inspires a more respectful relationship with the natural world around us. So, after this wild journey from a 13th century cosmic model all the way to a 21st century wellness practice, let's just take a moment and synthesize everything we've seen. Here it is. This slide really shows you the entire 800-year evolution in a single snapshot. You have the classical top-down view, which sees the divine names as these grand cosmic principles organizing the universe from above. And then you have the modern bottom-up view, which completely reframes them as personal potentials that we can consciously activate from within, transforming ourselves and, in turn, our world. And all this leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought, one that's drawn directly from these modern sources. They make this powerful distinction between passively living, just kind of going through the motions, and actively animating life. So the question for us is, are we just passive recipients of the life we've been given, or can we become conscious participants in its vitality, co-creating our own reality from the inside out?